YouTube and welcome back to Oh My Dinosaurs Story Corner Week.
Oh My Dinosaur Story Corner
Week. Now if you didn't see last week's video, you'd be best checking that out because this is part 2 of 5 of the Mansion of Strange Shadows. So yeah, if you haven't seen the first part, you're probably best off checking that. But we're jumping straight into chapter 2. As I explained last episode, this is from the Bunty Book for Girls 2002. It's just a story that I think I quite like it. I think it's quite a fun story. It does take a bit of time to get going. Part 2 is where it really gets, into the... Part 1 was just set up. So here we go with chapter 2, Cold Comfort. The almost blinding glare ahead burst apart into a flurry of snowflakes and the dark-haired girl stumbled through the deep drifts. Ahead of her, past the white-capped trees, she could see the great old house. She was cold and dazed and had no idea how she had gotten here on this wintry night, but at least there were lights on in the window of the house. She staggered on towards it. Her eyes stung and the drifting snow blurred her vision, but she saw enough to be sure that there was something familiar about the mansion. As it loomed even closer, she was certain she'd seen its towers and spires before, but when? Come on, think, she muttered, then stopped, horrified. It wasn't just where she was or how she had got there that she couldn't remember. My name, she gasped. What's my name? Who am I? As she sank to her knees in the snow, a voice in the wind seemed to answer her cries. Catherine! Miss Catherine! A tall man, dressed entirely in black, stood in the great doorway. He held an old oil lantern and was looking around for signs of life. When he finally spotted the sobbing girl, he called out, Miss Catherine, there you are at last! The tails of the dark man's coat flapped in the wind, and he hobbled through the white drifts, supporting himself with a cane. Come quickly, he called back towards the house. It's Miss Catherine, I've found her! The girl repeated the name to herself. Catherine. I'm Catherine, while figures raced from the house to surround her. She tried to stand, but the cold and the excitement caused a wave of dizziness to sweep over her. The people around her seemed to melt into shadows as she passed out. When she awoke, she was no longer shivering in damp clothes. Instead, she was warm and dry in a big, comfortable four-poster bed. A log fire burned brightly and candles added to the shifting glow in the bedroom. You're awake, cousin dear, said the smiling girl who sat by the bed. Thank goodness Mr. John found you safe and well before the storm started again. Catherine stared at the girl. Her long blonde hair was tied back with ribbons and she wore a long, pale blue dress with lace frills. The girl was gazing back at her with a look of concern. She placed a hand on Catherine's brow, feeling her temperature. Are you quite well, Catherine? The blonde girl asked. You look much distressed. Perhaps your time lost in the snow has made you feverish. I shall summon Uncle Christopher at once. There is no need, Miss Nancy, said a cold voice from the shadows. The man in black seemed to materialise from the gloom. Your uncle and aunt and cousin David shall be here shortly, but first we must ensure that poor Miss Catherine is well enough to see them. Yes, Mr. John, said Nancy, bowing slightly. You always do take such good care of us all. Catherine thought the girl sounded wary of the man, who she now realised was wearing a butler's uniform. Nancy slipped quietly away and the butler, John, looked deep into Catherine's eyes, murmuring, You are in shock, Miss Catherine. You do not know what is happening or where you are. He sat by the bed, resting his hands on the carved wolf's head on his cane's handle. The girl, Nancy, Catherine began. She said we were cousins, but I can't remember ever seeing her before. But there is something I recognise about the house and about you. The butler flashed an icy smile. Of course you recognise the house. It is where you live very happily with your aunts and uncles and cousins, and I am here to make sure you stay one big happy family. Soon you will remember. You will know that you belong here. Then you will never want to leave. You will never go running off again. It would be dreadful if another storm were to strike while you are outside the mansion. Catherine found herself nodding at the soothing words. She was starting to feel dizzy again, as if she was falling into a trance. Just then, she was brought to her senses as the door flew open. Nancy swept in, followed by a man in a long-tailed coat and riding boots with flowing blonde hair. A boy in a little sailor suit and a beautiful woman in an elegant velvet dress were with them. Were these her relatives? Why did their clothes look so old-fashioned to her? She turned to ask the butler, but caught sight of him slipping quietly away. The man, Uncle Christopher, threw open the curtains, letting grey light spill in. Snow lined the window panes, and Catherine shivered. "Come along, girl," smiled Uncle Christopher. "You've led us a merry chase, but there's no harm done. You're fit enough to get up and about, eh?" "Christopher, please," the woman sighed. Catherine needs her rest." The man laughed. "Nonsense, Virginia. She's young and David and Nancy need a new playmate." Suddenly a look of fear flashed in Christopher's and Virginia's eyes. There was a crash as the window blew open and a flurry of snow scattered on the carpet. They're glad of their playmate's return," Christopher babbled, struggling with the window. The others looked fearfully around as if searching for a threat in the shadows, but they were alone in the room. "New playmate?" Catherine wondered quietly. "I thought we were all supposed to belong here." She was instantly sure that she was as much a stranger to them as they were to her. Christopher finally slammed the window shut and stormed out of the room, followed by David and Virginia. Nancy smiled weakly at Catherine. "Is it always so cold here, Nancy?" Catherine asked. "I wish the sun would come out." Nancy looked puzzled but didn't reply. Instead, she tossed a velvet dressing gown on the bed. With a mischievous grin, she said, "Come on, cousin, let's play." Catherine pulled the dressing gown over her long cotton nightgown, and the two girls were soon tiptoeing along corridors with brightly painted walls and thick carpets. They crept down a winding staircase and into a huge hall lined with suits of armour and heads of animals. Catherine was now certain she had been there before. "I do like having you to play with," Nancy said. "Cousin David is no fun. He always does as he's told." "There must be a town nearby," Catherine said. "Don't you have any friends there?" "Town?" Nancy repeated, her voice hushed. We never go there. Not with the storms." "But," Catherine insisted, "what about when the snow stops, like summer?" "The snow never stops," Nancy said. "Come on." She led the way into an alcove in the room beyond. Her eyes lit up with delight and she whispered, "We're not supposed to be in here, so keep quiet. Mr. John will be very angry if he catches us. This is where he keeps the precious things of the house." The room was filled with ornaments, all crammed on shelves. The polished surfaces gleamed. Nancy gently touched a delicate crystal horse. Suddenly a rumbling shook the room. "It's a storm coming again," Nancy yelped. "That's not thunder," Catherine called over the din as the shaking grew stronger. "It's more like an earthquake." "This always happens before the snow comes," cried Nancy. "Stay still, it'll soon be over." But Catherine couldn't stay still. The room was shaking far too much for that. Ornaments shuddered on their shelves but didn't fall. She gripped the shelf in front of her. If she lived here, why couldn't she remember any of this? Glass cases and statues jiggled in front of her. Then she saw it. The house surrounded by white-capped trees inside a glass bubble where snow gently fell. "The snow globe!" she yelled, grabbing it. That would explain the shaking before the storms and why Nancy had never been beyond the grounds or seen the sun. "We're trapped inside a snow globe!" With a snarl of rage, the dark-clad butler leapt out of the shadows. "You mustn't touch the precious things," he commanded. "Put it down!" "You've got it," Catherine said, hurling the globe to the floor. The glass shattered and a rush of memory came flooding back. "You won't be ordering anyone around anymore, Mr. John. Or should I say Lord Jonathan Nightshade?" With a furious snarl, the dark figure faded away like a phantom. Had he ever really been there? The room seemed to fill with a blizzard of snow, whirling round Nancy and Catherine. The blonde girl grabbed Catherine's hand and beamed. "I remember now. I remember who I was before I touched the snow globe." Catherine remembered too. She remembered the school trip to Nightshade Mansion, the statue with the cruel face and the wolf's head cane, and the legend of the curse. She remembered sneaking away with Lara and finding the ornament room, and how, when she had first lifted the snow globe, a white flash had transported her to this icy trap. The others in the house had obviously been trapped in the same way, and Lord Jonathan had appeared as Mr. John to make sure they remained there. Within seconds, the storm had faded. The room was now dusty and gloomy, and she was back in her own clothes. She looked up and saw the faces of Nancy, Christopher, Virginia, and David as they faded into the air. "Thank you," the girl whispered. "We can go home now." Then they were gone. "You're back where you started, Cat." But where was Lara? She had only stepped out of the room to surprise Alex. How long had Cat been trapped? The snow globe lay in pieces in front of her. The carving of the house had cracked and the round base was split. Something dark and gleaming poked out of the broken base. A black metal star. "The weird door," Kat gasped. "It's like one of the carvings. But why hide it inside an old ornament? Had Lord Jonathan been trying to protect it? Was that the reason for the spell to trap anyone who touched the globe?" Pocketing the star, Kat raced out of the room. She wanted to show Alex and Lara what she had found. Even Mr. Selby and Dr. Grayson would be dead impressed. As she left, she didn't notice a dark shadow which drifted out of the smashed globe and slid into the hallway after her. Dun dun dun. Well, that was a slightly more exciting chapter than chapter 1. That was chapter 2. Join me again tomorrow when we will be reading chapter 3, which is called The Ghastly Gallery. Until then though, thank you for watching and have a nice day.
Tell me a story, oh ho ho. It's not nearly Christmas, oh ho ho. It's a story, oh ho ho. I don't like this, oh ho ho. That is what Sewage said when he watched this, oh ho ho.
Here's a little picture of the star ornament. This is unrelated. There's a picture of the star ornament. It's a very misshapen sort of star. So we've found one of 3. If you hadn't sort of guessed the structure, like I said, this is 5 parts. Part 1, introduction. Parts 2, 3 and 4, individual adventures for our 3 main characters. Part 5, conclusion. So that's where we're going with this. Yeah, see you tomorrow. Bye.
Oh ho ho.